Queen Alara walked through her golden palace while morning light spilled through tall windows. The capital city below her glittered like a jewel, its streets full of laughter and music. People lived safe and calm lives under her rule. They believed nothing could ever threaten their world again. It was a time of peace and order. Alara enjoyed her duties, but often felt a quiet emptiness inside. She had learned through tutors, politics, and long meetings, yet nothing ever seemed truly alive beyond her court walls. The stories her old teacher once told her as a child still drifted in her memory, stories about powerful warriors, strong men who fought with courage and honor. They were said to have saved the world long ago, shaping the peace she now ruled. But she no longer believed in those tales. At her evening banquets, her ministers sometimes mentioned these men of legend, calling them the Old Defenders. They spoke of soldiers who traveled across the lands with only their will and their hearts to give them power. Alara would smile politely and say the world had moved beyond such fantasies. She trusted science, technology, and careful planning, not fables about men swinging swords or fighting impossible foes. Yet, when the night grew quiet, she sometimes found herself staring at the stars from her balcony. Something deep inside whispered that maybe those stories were not useless after all. She would think of the men who stood at the edge of history, facing fear without shields or drones. But in the morning light, when she dressed in silk and gold and met her council, she hid those thoughts carefully. Alara's life moved in perfect rhythm. Her guards bowed. Her attendants followed in silence. Her halls filled with bright color and the sound of soft music. Every moment was controlled. Every day was safe. Her people praised her kindness, her beauty, her calm mind. Yet calmness was not the same as strength, and peace was not always eternal. One afternoon, an advisor rushed in during a meeting. His face was pale. His voice trembled as he announced that the skies had changed color. A strange light spread over the horizon, and machines across the city had begun to fail. The power lines flickered, the air buzzed like a living thing. Alara raised her head, frowning slightly. She ordered her commanders to investigate, believing it was only another system error. But within hours, the situation turned worse. The great screens of the control towers went dark. The sound of explosions rolled like thunder from the northern edge of the capital. Smoke rose higher than the towers. Alarms cried out across every district. For the first time in centuries, the peaceful citizens ran for cover. Alara stood on her balcony as the wind carried ash through the sky. She watched her beautiful domes and gardens fill with chaos. Her soldiers tried to hold the gates, but the attackers, whoever they were, moved with frightening speed and precision. They destroyed the outer defenses as if they had studied them for years. Her guards shouted orders and fired their weapons, but the enemy came through every street, unstoppable. Her general, a man named Dean, entered the throne room and dropped to one knee. "Your Majesty, we must move you now," he said. His eyes showed what his calm voice tried to hide: fear. Alara stared at him for a moment before nodding. She gathered her long coat and followed him through secret corridors beneath the palace. The air smelled of dust and oil as they descended. They reached the transport chamber, but before they could escape, an explosion shook the ground. The ceiling cracked apart. Stone and steel fell like rain. Alara was thrown to the ground. When she opened her eyes, smoke clouded everything. The light flickered red from the fires above. Her ears rang, her mouth tasted of metal. Voices shouted in the distance. Dean was gone. The guards who had escorted her lay still. She tried to call out, but the roar of destruction drowned her voice. Crawling forward, she rose to her knees and pushed through a broken archway. Outside, the city was a shadow of what it had been only hours before. Fires burned where gardens once stood. The streets ran empty. In that moment, something inside her shifted. Remembered the stories again, the legends of strong men who fought when hope seemed lost. She had dismissed them all her life as fairy tales meant for children. But now she understood why such stories were told. They existed to remind people that even when peace breaks and power fails, courage is the one thing that can still rise. As the queen stood alone in the falling ash, she did not yet know who would appear to save her, or that a human warrior thought lost to time was already on his way. But the still air seemed to whisper his coming, as if the world itself remembered the myths she had forgotten. Queen Alara opened her eyes to gray light and smoke. The ground shook again, and another distant explosion sent dust falling from the broken ceiling. She tried to stand, her body aching from the fall, her fine dress torn and darkened by soot. A soft ringing filled her ears, muting the world around her. The silence that followed was worse than the noise of battle, made her feel truly alone. She stumbled forward through what was left of the passage. The air was heavy and bitter. Ash! The beautiful halls of the palace were gone. The gold and marble glimmered faintly under layers of ash. Every corner that had once shone with candles and laughter now glowed with fire and falling embers. As Alara walked through the ruins, she found few signs of life. A soldier's flag lay broken across the floor. Crown Guard's sword was half buried in dust. The proud banners of her family had burned away. Her heart twisted with guilt. She had believed her city could never fall. She had never even prepared for the idea. Far above her came a crashing sound. She froze, her heart pounding. Footsteps echoed across the long corridor. In the flicker of firelight, a tall figure appeared through the smoke. Alara took a step back, her hands trembling. The figure lowered a weapon and spoke with a calm, steady voice. "It's all right. I'm not here to harm you." The voice was deep, worn by time and battle, yet strangely gentle. The man stepped closer, his face visible now. He was dressed in dark armor that looked old but strong, patched in several places, as if it had seen many wars. His eyes were sharp but kind, and he carried himself with confidence. Lara studied him, still unsure. "Who are you?" she asked calmly, though her voice trembled a little. He gave a short nod before answering. "Cole Ward. Soldier." She frowned. "Soldier of what army?" "I do not know your uniform." Cole looked around the shattered hall before replying. "Maybe this world has forgotten the kind of men I belonged to. But we were human. We fought for the same reason any human does, to protect what matters." Ilara's gaze softened, though confusion lingered in her thoughts. "You speak as if you stepped out of one of those stories my people call myths." He smiled faintly. "Perhaps your myths remember truths that your world forgot." Before she could question him more, the sound of falling debris interrupted them. Cole's expression sharpened. "We can't stay here," he said quickly. "There are still enemies near the palace grounds. You need to move." He reached out a hand. For a brief moment, Alara hesitated. She had been taught never to trust strangers, especially not men whose origins were unclear. But as the walls groaned and another explosion shook the earth, she placed her hand in his. His grip was steady, firm, and strangely reassuring. Cole led her through the cracked hallways. He moved like someone who had walked through danger 100 times before. He seemed to know where safety might hide, which turns to take, when to wait, when to move. Alara followed him quietly, her long coat brushing the dusty ground. Near the outer gates they stopped. The bodies of guards lay scattered. Smoke curled into the early dawn sky. Cole crouched beside one of the fallen men, checking for signs of life. When he found none, he lowered his head for a moment. Alara watched him silently. This man carried his strength differently than her trained officers. He looked weary, but there was a fire in his eyes that her soldiers never had. It was more than discipline, it was belief. After a while, Cole glanced back at her. "Do you have any secure place away from the city?" Alara nodded slowly. "An old base in the eastern hills. It was closed years ago, but supplies might still be stored there." "Then that's where we go." As they moved through the half-destroyed streets, Lara saw scenes that made her chest tighten. Children hiding in doorways, smoke rising from homes she had once visited. People who had looked to her for protection now running without direction. Each cry of fear hit her like a blade. She wanted to stop, to help, but Cole shook his head. "You can't lead them if you die here. We get you to safety first, then we come back for them." She understood, even if it pained her to accept it. They reached the boundary of the city, where the road sloped upward into the hills. Behind them, the capital still burned. Cole paused for a moment, his eyes scanning the horizon carefully. "I need you to keep close," he said quietly. Alara looked at him with new eyes. "You act as though you have done this many times." "I have," he replied simply. "Too many." Something in his tone made her fall silent. She sensed his past carried weight, the kind built from sacrifice and loss. She turned away from the sight of her fallen palace. As they climbed higher, an orange light from the burning city stretched into the dim evening sky. The queen who had once ruled with calm certainty now walked beside a man who claimed to be a soldier of forgotten wars. She did not know whether to fear or to trust him, but she understood that he had come at the moment her world most needed someone like him. When they reached the ridge, Cole glanced back one last time. "You said men like me were myths," he said quietly. "Now we'll see if those myths can still save your world." Ilara said nothing, but for the first time in her life, she began to believe that they could. The road through the hills was rough and broken. Wind carried the smell of smoke from the valley below. Queen Ilara followed Cole up the slope, stepping carefully over sharp rocks and dry grass. Long coat had torn at the edges, and her shoes were covered in dust. Every few minutes she looked back at the capital. The fires still rose high, lighting the sky in flickering red. Cole kept a steady pace, walked with quiet purpose, scanning the distance often, listening for danger. His movements were sharp but calm, like a man who had lived too long in war to be surprised by it. He carried a rifle across his shoulder, a weapon older than anything Ilara had ever seen. Though worn, it looked dependable, as if it still held part of his spirit inside it. At last, they reached a large stone entry, half buried by vines. Cole brushed the plants aside and pushed the metal door until it creaked open. Inside was a tunnel leading into the mountain. The air was cool and damp. Lights along the walls flickered weakly when he flipped a small switch near the entrance. "This place still has power," he said quietly. "You were right about the supplies." Ilara stepped inside and looked around. "It was built long ago," she said. "My ancestors used it during the early wars. It has not been opened in many years." Cole nodded. "Then it should be safe." They followed the tunnel until it opened into a chamber lined with old machines, crates, and dusty tables. Cole placed his rifle down and began checking the storage boxes for food and equipment. Ilara sat on a bench and let herself breathe. For the first time since the attack began, she had a moment to stop and think. Her hands shook as she looked at the dust-covered floor. She thought of her people still trapped in the city and of the brave guards who had fallen trying to protect her. She had always believed that leadership meant calm smiles and wise plans, but no plan had prepared her for the ruin she had seen. Cole opened a box and found medical kits and water containers. He handed her a small bottle of water. "Drink, you need strength," he said. His tone was kind but firm, the way a soldier talks when he has learned that care must mix with discipline. Ilara accepted it with a faint nod. "You seem very sure of yourself," she said softly, "as if you've lived this life forever." Cole gave a small smile. "It feels like forever," he replied. "I've seen too many cities burn. Each time someone like you sits in a room and thinks the wars are gone forever. But wars never end, not truly. They rest until people forget why they must be ready." She looked at him thoughtfully. "I believed humans had grown wiser, that we no longer needed to fight." He leaned against the wall. "Peace is good, but peace without strength fades quickly. The moment you stop believing there are people ready to stand up and fight, you lose what made you strong to begin with." Ilara was silent for a moment. "You speak like the men from the legends," she said finally. Cole's eyes softened. "Maybe your legends were about people like me. Maybe not just me, but all those who learned to fight for something more than pride." The room fell quiet except for the soft hum of the old lights. Ilara studied him as he cleaned his rifle. His face carried lines from years of hardship. His hair was uneven, cut short by necessity, not by fashion. Yet he carried an unspoken kind of grace, the sort that came from purpose, not from wealth. When he noticed her gaze, he said, "Your people will need you to lead them again. But first they will need to believe in something. Right now, I think they believe in nothing but fear." Ilara frowned. "You think I can give them hope, after all this destruction?" "I think you can," Cole said simply. "They still look to you, even now, but they need to see more than a queen. They need to see that even someone like you can fight beside them." Ilara looked down at her hands. They were pale, soft, the hands of a ruler who had never held a weapon. "I don't know if I can fight," she whispered. Cole handed her a small old pistol. "Then learn," he said. She hesitated, then took it. The metal felt oddly heavy, yet it filled her with a strange energy, a spark she hadn't felt before. She looked at the weapon, then up at Cole. "Show me," she said. He nodded once. Gently, he showed her how to hold it, how to steady her aim, how to breathe. His voice was patient, and his movements were exact. As she practiced, she saw something new in his eyes. It wasn't pity or pride, it was trust. Hours passed that felt like minutes. At last Cole said, "That's enough for now. You'll learn faster than you think." Ilara lowered the pistol and met his gaze. "If the old warriors were like you," she said quietly, "then maybe my people were wrong to call them myths." Cole's lips curved into a faint grin. Myth or man, it doesn't matter. What matters is that there is still one left. Outside, the wind carried the sound of thunder rolling through distant clouds. The sky flickered faint blue as lightning struck beyond the hills. Ilara looked out from the tunnel entrance at the smoky horizon. Something changed within her that night. For the first time, she no longer felt like a ruler standing above her people. She felt like one of them, ready to fight for all she had once taken for granted. In the shadows beside her, Cole stood watching the horizon too. Neither spoke again. But both knew the same truth. This war would test not only their strength, but the very spirit of humankind itself. The morning came cold and gray. Mist covered the hills, and the ground was wet from night rain. Cole was already awake when Queen Ilara opened her eyes. He had cleaned his weapon and checked the area outside the tunnel. His movements were careful and quiet. Lara rose slowly and pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders. She walked to the mouth of the tunnel, where the mist drifted like ghostly smoke. Below, the capital city lay in ruins. Black columns of smoke curled into the sky. For a long time she stared without speaking. She could not believe that the great city she had ruled only yesterday had become so still, so broken. Cole came beside her. "You cannot help your people by mourning from up here," he said softly. "We need to move soon. There may be survivors hiding in the outer districts." Ilara nodded. "Then we will go. I will not hide while my people suffer." Cole looked at her with quiet approval. "Then get ready. It will be dangerous, but danger is part of life now." They left the hiding place and began their journey down the hill. The road was muddy and full of debris. Trees were burned, and the smell of ash filled the air. Cole walked ahead, scanning every turn. Taught Ilara how to move silently, how to watch for danger, and how to react fast if they were attacked. At first she made mistakes. Her steps were loud, her hands shook when holding the pistol. But Cole corrected her patiently, his tone calm, and his eyes never harsh. "There is no shame in fear," he said. "Only in letting fear decide what you do." By noon, they reached the edges of the ruined city. Houses stood half destroyed, the streets littered with broken glass. The silence between them was heavy. Then they heard faint sounds. A small voice crying from behind a collapsed wall. Ilara hurried forward before Cole could stop her. Behind the rubble, they found a little boy, no older than 8, hiding beside a dog that whimpered softly. The child looked up, frightened, his face streaked with dirt. Ilara knelt beside him. "It is all right," she said gently. "We are not here to hurt you." The boy stared at her crown pin, now dull and dusty. Recognition filled his eyes. "You're the queen," he whispered. Ilara hesitated. "Yes," she said slowly. "But right now, I am only someone trying to help." Cole kept watch while Ilara checked the boy for injuries. His name was Aaron, and he had lost his parents when the attack began. Ilara helped him stand, and Cole gave him his water canteen. The act of kindness softened the soldier's rough image in her eyes. They led Aaron and the dog toward the old city square. Along the way, a few other survivors joined them. An older woman with bandaged hands, a young couple carrying an injured brother. The small group moved together carefully, trusting Cole's directions. When they reached the square, Ilara stopped in shock. The statue of her ancestors stood broken in half, the great flag that had once waved above the palace now trampled in the dirt. Tears filled her eyes, but Cole's voice steadied her. "If symbols fall, you build new ones," he said. "The people will not follow stone. They will follow a heart that still beats for them." Those words struck deep in her chest. She climbed onto a pile of debris so that everyone could see her. The smoke from the ruins drifted around her, and her voice, though tired, rose clear. "My friends," she said, "our city is hurt but not lost. We are not finished. We are still here, and as long as we stand together, no power can destroy what we are." The small crowd listened. their faces changing from fear to quiet strength. Cole watched her from the edge of the crowd, a faint smile on his lips. He saw not the royal figure of the palace, but a woman who had found the courage within herself. After she finished, Cole stepped forward and began to give orders. He showed the survivors how to make barricades and how to move injured people to shelter. He taught them how to collect food and signal others who might still be alive. Ilara helped him every step. Her fine clothes covered now with dust and ash, she carried wood, shared water, and worked beside her people. Those who saw her like this were reminded of why they had loved her once, not as a ruler distant in her castle, but as a person who cared. When night came, they built a small fire in the square. Aaron sat beside the queen, holding his dog close. Cole sat across from them, his rifle resting nearby. The orange flames danced in his eyes. Ilara looked at him and said quietly, "Today I saw courage come alive again." "You were right, Cole. There is still strength in us." He nodded. There always was. It only needed a spark. Silence wrapped them for a while, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the faraway sound of wind moving through the ruins. Ilara glanced toward the sky, where stars peeked through the drifting smoke. "Do you think we can win?" she asked. Cole met her gaze. "Winning starts here," he said, tapping his chest. "Before a city is taken back, the heart must learn to fight again." Ilara felt his words settle inside her like a promise. She turned back to the small group of survivors sleeping under the faint glow of the fire. They had found hope again, and though the road ahead would be long, she knew they would not walk it alone. That night the queen who had once doubted the old legends fell asleep beside a living one. While the ruins around them whispered that the spirit of humanity was not gone, it had only been waiting to rise again. The sun rose over the damaged city, touching the broken towers with pale light. Smoke still drifted in the air, but the dark clouds were thinning. Queen Ilara stood at the edge of the square, her eyes fixed on the horizon. Round her, people worked to clear the streets. They were tired, hungry, and scared, yet something new lived in their movements. It was a quiet strength, the kind that grows when fear begins to fade. Cole walked among them, giving short, simple orders. Everyone listened to him without question. He helped carry fallen beams, repaired weapons, and checked on the wounded. He moved without rest, as if he had no time to think of himself. Ilara watched him closely. There was something in his calm that gave her faith. When he came to her side, she said, "They follow you icily." Cole shook his head. "They follow you. I just show them what to do." Ilara smiled faintly. "No, they follow courage wherever they see it. Remind them of what humans were meant to be." Cole looked away for a moment. "Maybe, but I remind them of hard times too. Times no one should ever want to live again." The day passed with quiet work and planning. Survivors gathered food, water, and weapons from the ruins. They built a signal fire on the highest point of the square, hoping to reach others still alive across the hills. Before sunset, more people began to arrive, families, soldiers, and workers who had hidden during the attack. When they saw their queen walking among them, carrying tools and speaking with gentle warmth, their faces lit up. That night, the survivors met in the open courtyard. Ilara stood beside Cole, her voice steady. "We have lost much," she said, "but not everything. We have each other. We still have our hearts. We will take back what was ours and protect those who cannot protect themselves." A soft murmur grew through the crowd. Then one person began to cheer. The sound spread like fire until the whole square filled with the echo of determination. Cole looked at Ilara with quiet pride. That spark, the one he had spoken of, was alive now and growing. Later, when most people had gone to rest, Ilara and Cole walked through the quiet streets. The air was cool, and the stars above were clearer than before. The fires had burned themselves low, and the night seemed at peace for the first time in days. Ilara said softly, "When I first saw the city burning, I thought everything had ended. But now, seeing all of them together, I think maybe this is the beginning of something new." Cole nodded. "Most new worlds are built from the ruins of old ones. Pain is the way we remember what matters." She looked at him deeply. "And what matters to you, Cole?" He paused for a long moment before answering. "That humans never forget what they are capable of. Not just in war, but in compassion. Not just in strength, but in loyalty. That's what keeps us from turning into something weak. Alara felt tears in her eyes, though she did not cry. She realized that this man, who seemed so ordinary in body and speech, carried the spirit of every hero her teachers had ever spoken of. For the first time, she did not wish he were from her world of polished palaces and perfect laws. She was proud that he came from the rough soil of struggle, because he showed her the truth that her people had forgotten. When morning came again, word reached them that a strong enemy group still held control of the southern gate. Cole knew they had to act before more survivors were captured. He stood before a growing group of volunteers, farmers, workers, and a handful of guards. Ilara walked among them in simple armor. Her hair was tied back, her eyes sharp with focus. She looked nothing like the queen who had once ruled from silk and gold. She looked like one of them. Cole drew a rough map on the ground. "We hit fast before sunrise," he said. "We don't let them regroup. Every person here knows what they're fighting for. Remember that?" The plan was dangerous, and they all knew it, yet no one turned away. As they set off toward the southern gate, the first pale light spread across the horizon. The air was cold and alive with tension. When the attack began, it was fierce and sudden. Cole led from the front, his movements precise and fearless. Alara followed closely behind, her hands steady on her pistol. The people fought with all their strength, shouting not out of rage but out of hope. After hours of battle, the gate was theirs again. The attackers fled into the distance, leaving silence behind. The city stood wounded but free. Ilara walked through the smoke toward Cole. He stood near the gate, his uniform torn, a thin line of blood on his arm. When she reached him, he gave a quiet smile. "You did it?" he said. "No," she answered. "We did it. All of us." Cole looked at her for a moment longer, then turned his eyes to the horizon. "Then my work here is done." Ilara shook her head. "You could stay. We still need you." He smiled again, faint and warm. "You won't need me now. You've learned what I came to teach. People like me appear only when the world forgets what it means to be human. Now it remembers again." Before she could reply, he began walking toward the open road beyond the city walls. The wind rustled through the ruins, carrying his figure farther until he faded into the distance. Alara stood watching him, her heart heavy but proud. Around her, the people began to cheer again.
Oh.
They did not cheer for victory or revenge. They cheered because they had found what they had lost, the will to stand together. The queen who had once dismissed the stories of human warriors now carried one in her heart forever. The legend had lived, walked beside her, and reminded her that no myth is ever just a story. Sometimes it is a mirror, showing the strength that lives in every person who dares to fight for what is right.